Okay. Looks like we are live on Instagram and we are back on day drinking. I'm just waiting to see that little blue circle. There we go. We're live on Facebook. So welcome everybody and welcome back to part 2 of day drinking on this beautiful third day of August and the fantastic and glorious and horrible year of 2020. So glad you guys would join us. I hope you learned something wonderful about the sparkling wine that we just talked about, the 2016 Blanc de Blanc from J. Wilkes that I will continue to drink and enjoy. I'm actually double fisting a little bit of delicious local beer as well. And Jim, glad to have you back. Alan, good to see you. Hope everything is well. We're kind of getting ready to start harvesting some fruit. Probably, let's see, so it's August, so we'll start seeing bubbles come in. Probably in about 3 weeks. Probably in about 3 weeks, just at the end of August, we'll start seeing Pinot Grigio, Pinot Blanc. Pinot Blanc for J. Wilkes usually comes in about the very end of August, very early part of September. Then usually around the second week of September, we'll start seeing in Santa Maria Valley and Santa Rita Hills, some Pinot Noirs start coming in for those producers that tend to like to pick pretty early. And then, you know, for the guys who are kind of looking for the Adam Tolmacks and the Ken Browns of the world, generally pick sort of a little bit after the young kids that might be trying to produce these lower alcohol, higher verve wines. I would say the sort of the masters, you know, Adam Tolmack and Ken Brown, who I just absolutely love. Those guys will probably be picking, you know, between 24 and maybe 26 bricks, depending on kind of what's happening with the weather and what I think they would much prefer to be in the lower end of that. But they're very careful and they're out there watching. So I thought now that we're getting down to the nitty gritty of farming and getting all the stuff, we talk a little bit about farming and how what you do in the vineyard is going to specifically impact the flavor, quality, and style of the wine that's coming out of that vineyard. So first of all, I should mention that basically my entire experience as a vineyard manager, about 20, 21 years, at Clopepi Vineyards in the Santa Rita Hills, has really forced my ideas of viticulture and everything I'm going to be talking about to be very specifically designed to appeal and to work in the Santa Rita Hills and Santa Maria Valley. I don't know how to farm in New York. I don't know how to farm in Kansas. I don't know how to farm in Sonoma, although I think Sonoma and Santa Rita Hills, you know, these areas do have a lot of similarity. But I will try when possible that if something is really site specific to mention that. Most of what I'm going to be talking about today, though, isn't going to be as site specific as you should worry about. So hear what I'm saying, but also know. Ask yourself the fundamental question, is what Wes is talking about, does it work in my vineyard? And I'll try to kind of break down things that might not, but in general, there are things that all vineyards can use, ideas and concepts at all vineyards. For example, leaf to cluster ratio. We always want 12 leaves per cluster in a vineyard. Why? Well, if you can get 12 leaves per cluster on every vine in your vineyard, well, the hobgoblin of perfect viticulture is consistency of ripeness at harvest. So how do we make the best wine? We want that wine to be harvested, and the grapes from this vine, I would like them to have the same ripeness as grapes from 20 rows over and six vines down. If you can get every vine in your vineyard to produce ripeness at or around between within 1 bricks of each other. So, you know, let's use 24 bricks and say the ripest fruit I'm going to pick out of that vineyard on harvest day is going to be 25 and the least ripe I'm going to pick is 23. How do I get there? There's a couple ways. Number one, really good pickers that know that they're not going to put green fruit in the bins. They're not going to put green fruit in the buckets. They're not going to put green fruit in the crusher destemmer. If there's something that hasn't colored up or if there's something that doesn't have proper ripeness, if the white grapes are green or the black grapes are pink or even starting to turn darker, I want that cluster excluded or that part of the cluster cut out. I want perfect, adequate, and consistent ripeness throughout there. So number one, the most important thing is it doesn't matter what your fruit tests out at, because I could take half fruit at 19 bricks. It would make the most god-awful, horrible, screaming acid wine you'd ever tasted. Like so much acid, I couldn't even drink it. To 28 bricks or 27 bricks. fruit that's raisined, fruit that's dimpled, fruit that's dehydrated, fruit that the flavor profile has been permanently changed by hanging and being so ripe. I can put those two grape, sections together, 19 and 27, and it might look like 24 or 25 bricks and that, I could test it, and without tasting it, I would say my numbers are perfect. Well, congratulations, you're going to get all the horrible overripe, raisiny, porty flavors from the overripe grapes, and you're going to get the shrill, gnarly green acids from the underripe stuff. So the number in between doesn't matter. What really matters is ripeness that is absolutely uniform throughout the block. And another way to do that is dropping fruit. Now, the only place that I've really, been the vineyard manager was Clopepie, and the yields we got at Clopepie were fairly low. Good year, we'd had about an average of 2 to 2.5 tons per acre, and in a bad year, well, I think we got on average of 1/3 of a ton per acre. That means we were not even making a barrel of wine per acre. So that was a tough year. I think that was 2008. But in a year where hopefully you have at least maybe 2 tons per acre. I don't want to start dropping too much fruit if the yield is incredibly low. But here's the most important thing. I strongly believe if you have enough crop to support it, that when you are at 90% veraison, in other words, when your vineyard, all the clusters have turned from hard and green to either soft and golden or soft and purple or black, the last 10% that doesn't color up, drop it on the ground. At that point, because 2 weeks later, you're never going to remember which clusters were lagging, and they're always going to lag, and they're going to always add potentially green, herbaceous, and sort of vegetal flavor to the wine. Not always, but yeah, I think it's a pretty good rule of thumb to say that if you want to make better wine and you've got enough crop, to drop the last 10% that doesn't color up, that lags behind, drop those clusters right on the ground. So what that'll do is that'll give the rest of the fruit that you keep, the 90% that you keep, will be really, really uniformly ripe. And the consistency of that ripeness will make a better wine. And it'll be more than the 10%. It'll be more than 10% better because you had to drop 10%. So you just lost 10% of your crop. You just lost 10% of your wine. Obviously, there's not generally a 10% profit margin in the wine business. You could argue you just lost your potential of profitability. That being said, if your goal is quality, that's what you want to do. If your goal is quantity, well, leave more wood, push, if you've got the heat, if you've got the vigor to make a lot of wine, there's got to be wines for $5, $10, $15, $500, $1,000. So some people want to produce quantity, some people want to produce quality. If you want to produce quality, I recommend dropping the last 10% of grapes at veraison. If you don't really care, if you want more and more wine, what I would do is just to make sure that if you are going to allow a large crop to go all the way to ripeness, you might want to get it a little more ripe than if you had a smaller crop, because that way, as long as it's really, really adequately ripe, you'll get a little dehydration and get a little more intensity, a little more color, and a little more sort of persistence and length in the wine. I think that's going to be very important. All right. So what else was I going to say? I was going to definitely talk a little bit about, and I've got my notes right here. Just take a quick note. It's really also quite important to understand kind of what happens in the vineyard in a normal year. So we have pruned the vineyard. Pruning the vineyard, we're going to take 90% of the potential of the wood that grew last year off the vine. We're going to give the vine a haircut and keep it really, really tidy so that the growth we get from last year's wood is what's going to produce this year's fruit. Listen to that again. The fruit we get in 2020 was basically created last year in 2019 when the dormant buds from the growing canes became activated to be fruitful by sunlight. So the most important thing is you not only are doing canopy management to keep sun and wind in your fruit zone to improve the character and quality of the wine for this year, but you're also opening up your canopy to sun to make sure that the sun activates this year's buds to make next year's fruit, because everything in a vineyard is on a 2-year cycle. This year's fruit production is dependent on last year's sunlight in the canopy activating those buds that would produce this year's wood. Last year's wood makes this year's fruit. This year's wood makes next year's fruit. So everything in grape growing not only requires, and this is tough for someone as ADD and ADHD as me, but you not only have to think about what you're doing that's going to affect the crop and the flavor of the wine in vintage, but also how the vine is going to react in subsequent years and have that. So think about that. So the pruning happens. Then the vine wakes up. As soon as the vine wakes up, the shoots start growing. And what you'll notice is most of the vineyard, you'll get most of the growth, maybe 90–95% of the growth exactly where you want it. All the buds are going to produce one shoot. If it produces two shoots, we call that a double. We go and find which shoot is smaller and less vigorous or less fruitful, and we knock that one off. So if there's a double shoot, we knock that off. If there's shoots growing from a part of the vine we don't want them to grow, we call them suckers. Suckers are knocked off. If there's little shoots coming off of the trunk, shoots coming out of the ground, shoots coming out of areas we don't want them to be, that's what we're going to knock them off. We call them suckers. We're going to go out and knock them off and get all the suckers out. Then, of course, we're going to basically go through and let the vine start growing. We're going to probably go out and start spraying some fungicide. Very important to spray fungicide, whether organic or conventional. Important to keep the mildew and the rot off the grapes. Mildew and rot tend to grow very strongly in cool coastal places like Santa Maria Valley, Santa Rita Hills. Really horrific and terrible mildew pressure, especially Pinot Noir and Chardonnay are very susceptible to it. So we need to make sure about every 7 to 10 days we go through with a good tractor and a tractor rig, and we spray a good fungicide to keep the fruit nice and clean. Now you can imagine if that tractor is spraying grapes, it's trying to spray the grapes, but all the leaves are in front of the grapes. The leaves are going to get hit by the fungicide, but it's not going to penetrate into the fruit zone. So one thing that's also very important that we do, and the timing is really important. As soon as the vines flower, and the moment they flower, as soon as they're done with flower, we start seeing the flowers kind of turn brown and fall off, and we see the berries start kind of swelling up to about pea size, and that's what we call set. So once we have set, or at set, or just after flowering, we roll in and pull leaves from the fruit zone. So we're pulling the leaves out of the way between the sun and the fruit. So sun and wind can go through. The wind can remove basically the humidity built up by the vines breathing and respiring and giving off water vapor as a byproduct of photosynthesis. So it's very, very important that the water vapor can escape the canopy so it doesn't get too humid and encourage mold, mildew growth. And also the kind of more bushy the fruit zone is, the more likely animals and critters are going to make a home in there. Birds' nests. I've seen snakes in the canopy. I've seen spiders, obviously. You name it. Squirrels. You name it. So we want there to be an open canopy for sun and wind to affect the character of the fruit. Because when you get sun on fruit, and if you're going to remember one damn thing, remember this. Sunlight on a grape cluster fundamentally changes its physiology and the character and quality and the flavor of the grape. Fruit that's grown in a shaded canopy is vegetal and herbaceous, and generally does not produce the same type of luscious fruit character and quality in the wine that a fruit that has open canopy with at least 10% canopy gaps and less than one leaf layer between the sun and the wind, or the sun and the cluster, to make sure that cluster absorbs enough sunlight that it really starts to improve in the character and the quality. And that's exactly what happens. Chardonnay should be golden. The Pinot Noir should have, and red grapes, they react to sunlight by producing anthocyanins and other phenolic and polyphenolic compounds to protect themselves against sun. So the color you get in a red wine is partially produced by the grapes to protect themselves against sun. So you got to make sure they get enough sun, but you also want to make sure they don't just get a terrible sunburn, which will crack the skin and basically cause serious problems in fermentation. So we got the pruning, talked a little bit about opening up the canopy, talked a little bit, then we're going to go through the canopy and knock off any shoot that doesn't have fruit on it. We call those non-fruitful or basal shoots, or we could also call them lateral shoots. Knock off all the laterals, open up the canopy. If you got your 12 leaves per cluster, you don't need just random shoots without fruit. They're not doing us any good, so let's get them out of there. Open up the canopy to sun and wind, and that's really important. And then we're gonna basically position all the shoots into basically sheets. So as you look down the vine, you're going to basically see just basically panels of leaves. And these panels of leaves are basically a solar farm for producing alcohol, which is one of the coolest things I can describe. The idea that you would have a vineyard that is vertically shoot positioned. So all of your leaves are all basically there. And if you'd watch a time-lapse photography of a vineyard during a day, every leaf you would see would follow the sun, which seems incredible, right? That a vine has the intelligence somehow, or the ability to basically follow the sun with its leaves, but the leaves do follow the sunshine. And so you get basically the east side in a north-south row. You're going to get the east side basically absorbing the morning sunlight, and that's where I like to do most of the leaf pulling. So the morning sunlight, which generally, so from 8 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock in the morning, you get full exposure of the clusters, and then maybe some sombrero leaves covering the top of the clusters. So from 10 to 2, the clusters are protected, and then from 2 till 8 o'clock at night, you're getting more sun and wind through the canopy. That, to me, is exactly what you want to do with the vertical shoot position trellis, to make sure that you have these tidy kind of panels of leaves. You want to pull the leaves from the fruit zone. Fruit zone is always in the kind of the first 18 inches of the canopy, so you're not really going to get much fruit. If you do see fruit up taller, it's called second crop, and unless you're a really bad viticulturist and winemaker, we don't put second crop in the wine. Biblically, you're supposed to let the peasants come and pick it for their own home wine. It's called gleaning. It actually is in the Bible. Allow the people in your village to come into your vineyard and take some fruit home to make themselves happy too. So, hey, it's all well and good. I have to talk about things that are biblical because Wednesday, Karen McNeil's coming on. We're going to talk all about her wine Bible. We're going to talk about her Emmy. We're going to talk about her James Beard Award. This is a really, really exciting guest. And if you don't know, Friday we're having a Zoom hangout. We're just going to have Q&A. We're going to drink. We're going to talk. We're going to hang out like old times. And then let's see, a week from Friday, I don't know. How about Bob Lindquist from Coupe? Are we killing it on these guests? Really, really loving all these wonderful guests. And then the Friday after that, we're going to be talking with a gentleman who just wrote a book on wine mythology, one of my favorite subjects. So that'll be a deep dive as well. So that gives you a little bit of an idea about farming. So again, the most important thing to remember is leaf pulling, sun and wind in the canopy improves the flavor of the wine and will always make better wine than fruit that's grown in a shaded canopy. If you ever taste a cheap cab that tastes like green bell peppers and canned olives, you can say, well, you don't have to say, why did you pour me this awful glass of wine? You could say something nicer like, wow, this was clearly grown in a rank and shaded canopy. So now I've taught you how to say something. And then, basically the idea is delicious and wonderful wine is generally really being pushed forward by canopy management. Canopy management really changed in the early 90s with the publication of Sunlight into Wine by Dr. Richard Smart. So Dr. Richard Smart really was the pasteur of viticulture, really changed the way that we do vineyard and canopy management. But canopy management probably is more important to the quality of how a wine is made than anything you could or can't do. It locks and gives you the potential of quality in a way that nothing else can do once that fruit is picked. People always say, 80% of the wine is made in the vineyard. That's like 80% of the hamburger, comes from a cow. 100%. No one has ever been able to really debate this, that 100% of the potential quality of a wine is dictated by the quality of the fruit as it's picked out of the vineyard. Then you can do interesting things with it. You can chill it down, you can warm it up, yeast, barrels, bells and whistles, but really it's all about the farming, and farming comes down to canopy management. So hope you understand a little bit more about how we manage canopies in the vineyard. If you have any questions, let me know. Really love to see all my friends coming out again. It's really good to see each and every one of you. And even though we're keeping these parts of the shows kind of tight, not doing a lot of chatting, we are going to do at least once or twice a month where all we do is just hang out, drink, and talk. So we can really start having a little bit more conversation too. Thank you, Karen. I really appreciate that. Hope everything is okay in DC. And I know it's hot in a lot of parts of the country. Believe it or not, we came 2 degrees away in Santa Maria today to hitting 80 degrees. We have still not hit 80 degrees this summer. So yesterday was like 74. Today was like 77. and looks like we're going to be back down sort of in the mid 70s by the end of the week. So great for the fruit. Great if you guys want to come and visit. Great if you don't have air conditioning like we don't. So, you know, if you are in a part of a world where it's hot and sweltering, do get a glass of Pinot Blanc. And remember, yes, Day Drinking with Wes Hagen is brought to you by the Miller Family Wine Company, as well as J. Wilkes Wine. So go over to millerfamilywines.com or millerfamilywinecompany.com, jwilkes.com. Feel free. We would love to see you. We still do have an open tasting room in downtown Santa Barbara where you can taste and buy this delicious Blanc de Blanc. It's an excellent, excellent wine for the summer. And one thing I love about sparkling wine is it's really as close to a session beverage you get in wine. I mean, if you do it right, you can kind of drink champagne to sober up, which, you know, unless you're driving, then don't drink. It was an absolute pleasure for everybody. Oh, 90%. I will say, one last quick story, Karen. Karen's in the DC area, and she was drinking my wine during a BLM protest in DC, which just melts my heart. First time I was in DC, of course, I was in fourth grade or something, and my dad, who was a high school principal, and my mom, who was a lawyer at the time, took us to DC, and we had a reservation to go tour the FBI. And back then, this would have been 1979, 1980. To get into the FBI tour, suit and tie. You had to wear a tie. It was about August 3rd in about 1979. And I'll tell you what, it was the hottest day I can ever remember in my life. So I was wearing, you know, my dad was a high school principal, and I think my mom was in law school at that point. We had no money. So I was wearing a Sears polyester, I think it was a 3-piece suit. I honestly think it actually had a polyester vest and a coat and the pants. I just remember feeling like I was walking in hot water. And I do remember walking into the FBI building, not even thinking, oh my gosh, they have air conditioning. Everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. What did I remember seeing? I remember seeing Dillinger's gun. I remember seeing so many guns. The wall of guns was the coolest thing I saw. I want to say I saw Che Guevara's Rolex, because I understand that when Che Guevara went down, I think it was the CIA who took Che's Rolex off of him. And you think, you know, a communist revolutionary, why would he have a $1,000 watch? Well, you gotta, you know, all right, set our watches. Boop, you gotta have a good watch to be a good revolutionary. Those are my stories. The only other story I have to share to you today is go over on my Facebook page. I did actually find a note today, which I wrote down the address of a party 21 years ago, and I found that little note in my desk today, and that was the party where I met my wife. So I thought that was kind of cool too. So lots of stories. We're gonna be hanging out on Friday, Chan and I, and on Wednesday, Karen McNeil, 5 o'clock. Same bat channel, same bat time. Make sure to come on in and spend some time with us. Thanks, everybody. Went a little long today, but I think it was worth it. It's good to see all of you again. Take good care of yourself. Find someone in your neighborhood. Find someone in your family. Find someone maybe you don't know who might need some help. Reach out to them. Make sure they have all of the love and attention and resources they need. Do something kind for someone in your neighborhood. We're all in this together, and we're going to get out the other side. So really appreciate your time, and thanks so much for supporting J. Wilkes, Miller Family Wines, and of course, Day Drinking. Cheers, guys. Have a great night. We'll see you on Wednesday with Karen McNeil, 5 o'clock. Get your friends. Here we go.